Best unseen, best classic Battlemech. That is the topic that we're going to focus on in this podcast and this vlog. And I should say the unseen, now reseen, those terms, have they been reset with the successful completion of the Kickstarter? And as of this podcast date, about a year and a half out to getting some amazing new box sets, some amazing new re-imaged mechs. I find that a lot of players are drawn to the classical mechs on a duality. Early on, these were the first mechs that we were exposed to, the Warhammer, the Marauder, the Battlemaster. And, of course, iconically bringing in certain mechs from the various video games and computer games over the years, further kind of reinforcing this status. However, we're looking at an early tech level. We're looking at some conversions, and we're looking at various rules that were intended, essentially taking the visuals of the mech and mapping it to the technical manuals. A great example would be like the Marauder. That autocannon on the top, is it really an autocannon? Was it originally a laser or some sort of sensory pod on there? A lot of little quirks back and forth. I'm going to give you my vote, and I'm going to put forth my thoughts, and then we'll turn it over to the comments. Now, I have to say, if we're looking at classical Battlemechs, the criteria is not just raw tonnage or big guns, but rather, if you feel it's a light mech or medium or heavy or an assault, what is the justification within that role that makes it really, really shine among these classic mechs? My vote, the Battlemaster. The Battlemaster, in my opinion, along with the Catapult and a few other of the classical mechs that are out there, if you really quite don't know what to take, it works, it excels at every single role that it's thrown at. And the Battlemaster kind of has an answer for everything. And if that equation is a little bit complicated, just based on its configuration, its tonnage, its armor, its intimidation factor, it'll buy you a couple of other turns until you figure out what exactly you want to do. Not that we ever want to go toe-to-toe or head-to-head in Battletech, engaging one-on-one. We want it to more be like 2 or 3-on-1. But sometimes you have to do a holding action, or you're trying to figure out, based on the parameters of the mission, what can you really go for. So in my opinion, the Battlemaster, of course, it's a little bit easier the higher tonnage you go because you have more space to work with. But the paradox is the expectation of that machine becomes much, much higher the heavier tonnage that you go. On the way in, you have a PPC, inner sphere, best range to best damage, single shot ratio. Okay, you have heat, but that's not so much a problem with the Battlemaster PPC because it's only one. And the idea is to give you something to do as you're closing to that medium laser range on there. Compare that with the Marauder, another favorite mech of mine. Compare that with the Warhammer, another classic favorite of mine. Compare that with the Awesome, perhaps my number one favorite mech. And this is why the Awesome didn't get that vote, because it's not a reseen unseen. But we don't have to really worry about that with one PPC on the way in. Once we get to that sweet spot range with an assault mech, now we're going to be utilizing the brace of medium lasers. And the medium lasers being the best weapon inner sphere in the game in terms of range, damage, heat, battle value, and space, along with the locations, means I'm going to close even further. And I'm going to be looking to punch you. So it's almost like I've got the ability to punch, laser. We've got the SRM-6 and the machine guns. Now, this takes things in a slightly different direction of opportunity. Once you've punched through with the lasers or the fists, now you have a chance to mini crit seek with the short-range missile pack on there. In addition to having just some more punch, some more straight-up punch. The machine guns, if you're at really, really close 1 hex range, okay, it's another thing to shoot. And honestly, in theory, You could crit with a PPC once you've breached the armor and you've gone to internals. You have the same chance as a PPC as you do with machine guns. So you can crit seek with machine guns if you're that close, but the real role of those machine guns is anti-infantry, anti-personnel, because this is where we see some of the later heavier mechs really get bogged down with something like infantry, simply because light mechs can breeze past, medium mechs can breeze past. The nature of having all these guns and all this armor on a heavy or an assault class mech means it's going to be going to dominate key points on the table. That's going to be the thrust of your force. The opposing mech commander is going to look and say, okay, we're defending this area, or we've got to move to this point. Obviously, the heavies and assaults are going to go there. My heavies and assaults are going to go there. But if I can hot drop some infantry off of Karnov, or get some goblins up there and disperse and dig in with infantry, some of the dedicated heavy and assault mechs that don't have machine guns, they're in trouble. Infantry is a real pain, a real distraction, especially as the battle continues, where you take some hits, you go to internals, even if it's just one spot. The nature of how infantry attack and how they disperse on the attacks, they really ferociously crit seek more than anything else. And that's kind of the end thrust of infantry when you really want to finish off a mech. And we're going to explore that thought, that sentiment in another podcast. The Battlemaster, you're just going to blaze them with the machine guns on there. It has answers for everything. It wants to get close enough up, and now punch, punch, kick, laser, laser. It can be turned into a zombie mech. It has rear firing weapons on there too, which we don't want to forget. That does tend to come in handy on the heavier machines, especially the assault class, because you're going to get surrounded. You're going to do your best, but you're going to get surrounded, especially if you're fighting a delaying action on there where you park an assault mech and everybody else on your team's pulling back, and that's that delaying action. There's going to be some sort of bodyguard mech that your opponent has that wants to work around to the rear. So it gives you some options on there. I guess that's tied into the mech helmet and the neuro helmet, and you can kind of see on two screens what's going on. It was never really clear how, or maybe that's the second seat in the Battlemaster, although I believe that's like a command version or training version on there. But back lasers, back weapons, pretty helpful, pretty handy to have. The only real disadvantage that I see, and it's not so much battle value, because I believe the battle value you get is well spent, ammo. The ammunition on there. Compare that to, say, something like the Awesome, although there's range issues there. The Awesome just is, you're just going to have to core it out to blow it off. You're going to have to do that. There's no other way. The Battlemaster, although it's well protected with that machine gun ammo and the SRM ammo, you could light up on there. Yes, you could ammo dump, but that's the only real drawback for a machine that needs to get up there and needs to fight. However, we see this with a lot of other assault class mechs. So of these classic battle mechs, which one do you think is the best in terms of design, in terms of role, in terms of ferocity, inner sphere? What would you roll out with?